Hi, this is Mike Regan from Transact, and it is my pleasure to welcome back our good friend Brent Hutto, who is the Chief Relationship Officer for Truckstop.com. Brent and I also serve on the board of NASTRAC and have known each other for several years. And he has some data here that when he shared with me, I said, stop the presses, Brent. Would you come and share with our audience? So, Brent, I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Me too, Mike. Thanks for having us on. I've always admired what you do in the market, and I appreciate the partnership you and I have shared for the last 8 years. It's meant a lot to me.
Okay, well, Brent, one of the things that we coined the phrase here at Transact back in the fall of 2020 was what we called code red conditions in the transportation marketplace. We've sounded the alarm bells, tried to let people aware. But what I'd like to do is for you to walk our audience through the data that Truckstop has. And for those that may not be familiar with Truckstop, I'm sure I'm not going to do as good a job describing what they do, but if you could elaborate on it. Truckstop is the load board that all the brokers and third parties go to manage capacity in the transportation marketplace. And they do an outstanding job of tracking the correlation between freight that moves under contract versus freight that moves in the spot market. They create an index that I've often referred to in the 2-minute warnings, which is called the Market Demand Index, which tracks the correlation between load availability and capacity. And so Brent shared with me some numbers. Folks, you have to listen to this, because if you think 2018 was like a, oh my goodness type year, this one, you're going to have to come up with the new lexicon, because what we're seeing in 2021 is just literally, as Brent's going to show you, off the charts. So Brent, take it away. Help us understand what the heck is going on in this code red marketplace.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's our data is we're very fortunate to have a very relevant and current data. It's about as fresh as you possibly can get in the entire freight industry, the 750 million transactions or freight movement marketplace of the United States. And so we, the Truckstop.com data is the leading indicator of the entire marketplace. And that's the most important thing I think I'll probably say, is that if you want to understand what's going to happen in the market, look at the spot market, look at the spot market insights, and watch the market demand index, as you were talking about. We do business with 10,000 brokers. And it's about 100 million transactions that run through the spot market total. That's the entire marketplace. So this is extremely, extremely rich data. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the most recent data that we've had since the beginning of this year. Now we're coming out of a pandemic year, and you mentioned this. This is a new normal. So do not think what you used to think is going to apply completely across the board, because it doesn't right now. What you need to look at is, how's the marketplace performing right now? And everyone asked me the same question you did earlier, which is, how does it compare to 2018? Well, the slides you're looking at, these are load volumes. So the total amount of load that's in the marketplace since the beginning of the year. You will notice that it has gotten, well, it's gotten taller for us. In other words, there's more load in the freight marketplace right now than ever in the 41-year history since deregulation. Since deregulation, never had more freight in the marketplace. You want me to stop right there?
No, I don't want you to stop, but I want to let everyone think for a moment. 41 years, what we're seeing today, right, we have never, ever seen before.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing to do is that you always want to know what the trends are. And the spot market is the directional influence on how the overall marketplace is doing. So it's 100 million of the 750 million loads that move in the United States, which is the biggest market in the world. So what you want, when you look at a slide like this, you want to know, well, how did it trend over time? So the blue bars going up are the current volumes of loads in the market, which, by the way, if you'll look at 2019, I've labeled 2019 there, that's a normal market. An absolute normal load volume market was 2019. Well, you'll notice the blue bar on the far right on week 18 is 100% higher than it was in a normal year. So that, what does that tell you as a person that needs to move freight? We have 100% more freight in the spot market, which is the pressure relief part of the marketplace, than we normally have. So we'll normally have around 400,000 or 500,000 loads in a 24-hour period in one day. We have last Tuesday, we had 1.78 million loads in a 24-hour period on the Truckstop.com load board. It is an astronomical amount of freight. This includes all freight. So that's inside the market. So the thing to do is to look at this and go, how do I need to try to make plans to be able to move the freight that I've got? So, and it's important to look at load volumes, because rates follow volumes. As volumes increase, rates increase. If rates are 3 times higher if volumes are 3 times higher than they normally are, rates are going to be higher too. So when you see the chart here, you'll notice the green line. That's 2018. That was the highest market in history. You'll notice the blue bar on the right hand side says 8.25 million above it. Last week was higher than it was in 2018 at the same time frame. I put these numbers on here to show you that we had 8.25 million loads in a 5-day period last week on the truckstop.com load board, which is a phenomenal historic number. These are numbers we've never seen before. So the idea of planning your freight transportation, if I'm a shipper, if I'm a manufacturer that needs to move goods, I would be very collaborative right now with my transportation providers, whether they be a broker or a carrier, because if you don't, then you're going to be suspect to a marketplace that no one's in control of right now.
Well, let me just provide some context for the people that are watching this interview. So my good friend Derek Leathers from Warner, he shared with me in a conversation last week that even amidst this surge in volume, that capacity among publicly traded truckload carriers for the first quarter appears to have dropped by 2 to 3%.
Wow.
And one of the reasons for that, you may be, if you're a shipper out there scratching your head saying, if there's all this freight, why don't the carriers just increase capacity? They can't find drivers. And it's a chronological issue, the impact of COVID and drivers retiring. And, I had an interview with Rob Estes from Estes. Mm-hmm. They're a, $3.5 billion company. He told me I'd hire 500 drivers tomorrow if I could. And so for shippers, I want you to really focus in these numbers. It's not like I can go and get more trucks.
Correct. Autonomous
vehicles aren't happening anytime soon. So my major constraint is my ability to seat drivers. And so on the LTL side, something that a lot of folks need to listen to and think about is that the major constraint on capacity for LTL carriers are terminal networks. And they can't build terminals fast enough. And in many cases, they can't build them at all because a lot of local governments have a NIMBY phenomena, not in my backyard. So what this is really important that you're showing here, Brent, you mentioned, I think it was last week on Tuesday,
right? You
had 1.8 million postings on the board.
Correct.
Now, some of those may have been duplicate postings because the shipper said, I'm going to see if broker A or broker B can get. But the point I think you're getting at is not only are these historical highs, but looking out over the next 6 to 8 weeks, if you take a look at all of your trend lines for all of the years, we see more shipments in weeks 23 through 30 than we typically see in weeks 15 through 18.
Yeah, you do. What you see is you see different seasons coming in. Certainly, we're sort of in the middle of produce season, and that produces more freight in the marketplace. I think the thing to look at more importantly, Mike, you number one, you talked about not larger carriers, publicly traded carriers not being able to get drivers. That's because truck driving schools are only graduating 40% of what they normally graduate for new drivers coming to the market. That's one of the big problems. The other thing that's going on in this marketplace right now is that what's driving all of the freight in the market has been since the quarantine to today was goods purchasing. So goods purchasing has been up 40%. Every good hits a truck. What's coming back now, which is driving even more freight in the market, which means these trend lines that you see over to the right-hand side where there's no bars, you can't necessarily go by those. You can look at them sort of directionally, but you have to be careful from a top line standpoint, because when services purchasing, which is the bigger part of the economy, it's 60% of our economy in the United States, when those start coming back, that's going to drive more freight into an already constrained marketplace. So it's going to be more difficult to move freight. And that is predicted by every economist, and certainly by our numbers. That's going to go through the end of Q2, the end of Q3, and we're going to start potentially seeing some return to normalcy, not lower rates, just not lower than normal rates, but just a long glide back to normalcy, because we are in a rare air height when it comes to the number of loads that are in the marketplace and the freight rates.
Okay, so let's boil this down to practical terms, Brent,
Okay.
because I want people to understand the economics of this.
Oh goodness, yes.
So here's some points, folks, that you need to consider. At the height in week 18 of 2018, when we were in the midst of the perfect storm, the spot market rate was $2.61 per mile.
Correct.
Right now, last week you said it hit an historic high of $3.07 a mile.
Correct.
That's 46 cents against a base of $2.61. So you're talking somewhere in the area of about 14 to 15% increase year over year in spot rates. But keep in mind, in 2019, that rate was, I believe, somewhere in the area of $2.13.
Correct. Which is about a normal amount. $2.90 to about $2.10 is a normal spot market load.
Okay, if I go 213 though,
what
that tells me is I'm still 94 cents higher.
Yeah.
Again, base of $2.13. So
Yes.
all in all, I'm about 45% higher. Now, if you say, well, what was it in the beginning of the pandemic? That's an outlier. We don't even pay attention to that. The $1.73 a mile. But keep in mind, if you're saying, well, a large portion of my freight moves under contract, what we are seeing here, Brent, maybe you could elaborate on this, is that the tender acceptance rate for your contract carriers may be going down, forcing you to play more in the spot market.
Right.
So your percentage of freight moving under spot rates is going up. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, yes, sir. Absolutely. It's a great observation on your part. If you look at FreightWave's metric they put out, and it's a nice metric, it's called the Outbound Tender Rejection Index. That is contract freight that is rejected that's normally under contract. It has been at or above 20%. It's actually been at or above about 25% for 6 months. So that's 25% of the 650 million contract loads. Now that's all in, that's all the freight. So that's a phenomenal amount of freight that's not moving under its normal contracted amount that it does with carriers. That has to go either rebid, to be renegotiated, or it goes into a different part of the marketplace. A lot of that freight's coming to the spot market, and that's why you've got such historic load volumes in it. Which means when it hits the spot market, it's subject to an extremely volatile part of the market when it comes to rates, and those rates are going to go up because it adds more freight. The larger the volume of freight in the marketplace, the higher the rate. Every single time, it's never gone against that supply and demand metric in that like 25 years we've been watching.
Okay, so Brent, let's really bring this down to practical level for career implications for folks.
Yeah.
Truckstop, for those that may not be aware, is sponsoring the Transportation Rising webcast series that DMP and NASTRAC have put out. They've asked us here at Transact to put together the first session, which will be this week, called Grab a Seat at the Table. And Brent, I'm going to ask you to just share why this is so important. And let me just share a little story with you. I know this is going to come as a shock to you and members of our audience, but I wasn't necessarily regarded as Rhodes Scholar material in grade school. Okay, it seemed like I had other things on my mind. But there was always that day of reckoning when, especially at the end of the year, I had to give my parents the report card that was handed to me at school.
Right.
And there was no escaping this. My parents knew that a report card would be forthcoming. There was no place for me to hide. So eventually I had to basically have that day of reckoning and help my mom and dad, devise a strategy as to how I could do better in school, which meant no TV, no going out and everything else. And eventually it worked. But having said that, one of the things that we are talking about in this grab a seat at the table, that bad news doesn't age well.
No.
And there is no way I haven't talked to anybody. Well, actually, I've talked to two companies that kind of foresaw this and budgeted accordingly. Everybody else has freight budgets that are blown out of the water. Ocean rates blown out of the water, parcel rates blown out of the water, LTL rates blown out of the water, and truckload rates blown out of the water. Can you share because you're like one of the experts in this, and Truckstop has the data. What is your advice for people in how they can share this information to C-level executives in their company?
Oh, yeah. Well, what sage advice? First off, you may not have been a Rhodes Scholar when you were in school, but you're definitely one now. You're a guy that I turn to for such great insight into things. So I think you're selling yourself short on that one. But here's the thing that I think is important. If I'm a transportation manager for any shipper in America, what I want to do is my job is to advise the company on what's coming at them. In other words, I can't control what trucks do. I can't control what the marketplace does. I can't control what the economy does, but I can control the data that I get to try to help my company plan. So if you're a transportation manager, the best thing you can do is to get your hands around the best, most current data in the market that helps you understand directionally which way is the market going. Is it going to be up and it's going to be more difficult? Is it going to be down? It's going to be a little easier for me. And be able to grab that information and then take it to the C-suite, the leadership of your business, and say, here's what I see coming at us, and here's how I suggest we plan. Then you look like a hero instead of a zero, right? I mean, that's the most important thing, because what you want to do is just prepare the business for the things that they can control. And what you can control as a transportation manager is when you ship your freight and how you ship your freight. So to me, it's really looking at the data. And that's why we publish every week on Monday between 9 a.m. and noon Eastern Standard Time, the Spot Market Insights. It gives you a 7-day look back on how is the market performing. And if you watch that thing week over week, you will be Merlin the magician to your leaders, because you will know which way the market's going, because that's the benefit we've had for 25 years. We know the way the market's going because the spot market always leads the overall contract marketplace by at least 3 months to 6 months. And in today's market, it's more like 3 weeks to 6 weeks, because it's so pressure packed. So that's my advice, Mike.
Yeah, well, listen, Brent, that is great advice. But I want you to speak to the director, the manager, even the VP that says, Brent, this stuff is pretty complex. Will they listen to me? What words of encouragement could you provide to those folks that are concerned that they may not get the audience or the attention to basically be proactive in using this information to adjust their processes and in practices?
Yeah, great question, Mike. To me, it always comes to the bottom line. I think transportation from a shipper from a manufacturing standpoint is about 6 to 8% of the total cost of the product. When it goes way up, it makes the product a lot less profitable when it's sold at market. So to me, when you can come back with hardline numbers, you can look at rates. You can cascade those out over what it would look like if we ship now. If we look at the market, if it looks like it's directionally going down, and you could wait 3 to 4 to 5 or 6 weeks to ship something, shipping at a different time of the year where you could save your company money, or you could just have the capacity and get it to market because the market needs it right now because it's buying it at a high rate. So to me, it's really just looking at that data, looking at the actual rates that are in the market, because that's the bottom line. The bottom line is the rate costing you what you planned for it to cost you? Could it cost you less, or is it going to cost you a lot more and you don't ever see it coming? But really, to me, that's what I would do. If I'm a VP in the transportation end, the director, or I work for those guys, I would be looking at this data hard and planning it out, looking at the trend lines. Look at the trend lines on what have they done historically, because they do follow a pattern. Even if it's high or even if it's low, it follows a pattern. And then if you could just look at the market demand index, look at load volumes and look at rates, and you'll be a genius in the market. You'll know how to move the freight the most effective way.
Well, just wrapping it up, Brent, in our 2-minute warnings, we're just concluding how companies have what I call the 3E strategy to effectively manage their costs. And that is, they get educated about what's going on in the market. For those that are watching this very briefly, one of the things I find fascinating is, do you notice, and I may be embellishing it here, Brent, and if I am, please stop me, but the direction of these multi-year lines move in the same direction.
Yes.
Dips in the first quarter, picks up in the second quarter, starts to go heavy into the back end of the second quarter, mitigates at the third quarter until August, September. I've been in this business for over 40 years. This is the same stuff we see each and every year. So based on that, there are projections that we can start to make. But one of the things, and I'll weigh in with this, Brent, we ask everybody in this kind of marketplace, do you have a written transportation spend management plan that
Right.
out how you're going to manage the freight? 90% of the shippers have no written plan.
Oh, wow.
And they're in essence making gut decisions. Some of them could be good, but that's not necessarily the way you'd want to run the business. The second thing that we did, we shared a little ebook with folks about basically building that plan and the need to manage from within. So like you said, you have discretion about how it gets shipped, when it gets shipped, the volumes in which it gets shipped. Now, this may involve, getting with your salespeople because it means impacting customer decisions, your procurement people because it impacts inbound decisions. But at the end of the day, if you sit back and don't do anything, what I think your charts are saying, and I want to make sure I have this correct, and so if I'm off, but when you see a 13 to 15% increase in the spot market rate or 20% increase in the spot market, you're looking at much higher contract rates as well when those contracts come. If and so my point is, if you sit back and do nothing, instead of seeing your cost increase by 7 to 10 or 12%, you could see your cost easily increase by 12, 15, 20%. And if you're an ocean shipper, add an extra 10 points just for the heck of it because of the cost. Is this kind of what you guys see as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We see absolutely the same thing. Whether you have a favorable market towards you, a normal market where it's balanced between everybody, or a high market like you have today, you'll notice those trend lines, the lines that are going out to the right, the green one, the light blue one, and the navy one,
which is shipping volume.
Right, correct. It's the load volumes posted in the spot market over this is a 4-year, obviously a 4-year period because you've got 2018 till today. The point being is that you can watch these trend lines and make educated guesses. Look, there's nothing wrong with your gut. Wisdom of experience is great and it's fantastic. We hire for wisdom of experience because that brings something to a marketplace. But bring your wisdom, but also bring data. Look at the market data because it's available. It's available to you every week, week over week, that you can look at and you can put in your own systems and methodology and say, this is how it applies to my business. And then you can predict it going out and going, oh, hey, I know I don't want to go too heavy in this part of this part of the year because it's normally going to cost more at that part of the year. Maybe I need to ship a little less at that time. I still got to take care of the customers, but maybe I shift that 3 to 4 weeks and save 8 to 10% on my shipping because I know I'm going to have more competitive rates at that time, even if it's a high market, Mike. So all you got to do is look at the data, trust your gut, absolutely, but bring data every single time, and you'll have a great career in the shipping transportation industry. The data is good stuff. That's the important thing about it. It's really the data. And I'll tell you, if every shipper in America would take the time to just look at the spot market data, understand what it's done historically, they can trend that into the contract marketplace, and they just have a more enjoyable career because they don't get any hiccups.
Well, and then to conclude, hopefully the folks we're going to be mentioning this on the Grab a Seat at the Table.
Yeah.
For those of you that are listening to this interview after the webcast, it's available for you over at transact.com. But I just want to maybe close, Brent, and maybe you could directionally whether I'm on the right page here. There right now on the being educated part, you have Truckstop, you've got your friends at FTR, you've got waves. There's no excuse not the information that you need to understand what's going on in the market. It's out there, and it's out there for an incredibly reasonable rate. Okay. And so then the second thing I just want to emphasize is to share this information upwards.
Oh, yeah.
And so people can see the forecast. People all understand, is it going to be rainy? Is it going to be sunny? Because at the end of the day, my accounting professor Professor Perry, when I took the CPA review course, he used to say, you don't want to be up that tributary with no visible means of locomotion. So folks want to take this information from Truckstop, share it upwards. Brent, did I miss anything as we close out?
No, as always, Mike, you're such a good sage. You give such sage advice to the industry and to your customers. And we're just happy and honored to be a part of it. And our mantra at Truckstop is to help find a way for everyone to succeed. So we're always here to do that.
Brent, listen, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.